Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. This time around, we're going to be working on the wet sanding part of the project. And just to get started, we'll give you a couple tips here before we go any further. And then we'll get into actually wet sanding on the side of the body. Now, the one thing is, before we get started on anything, I made a mistake. I've already done this video once and I deleted it somehow or another in getting from the camera up to the editor. We went in and wet sanded the roof of the car, and then we went back in and did the buffing part of it on video. The buffing part I still have. So that'll be coming up after this video. But what we're going to do now is go back in on the sides of it, and I'm going to show you the wet sanding process, the same process that we did to get the roof to come out, and also the hood that we didn't do on camera. But it's the same procedures, same materials, everything like that. So just to get started, you want to have some sandpaper, and what I'm using on this particular build, and I dictate that by what my finish looks like and how much I need to cut the finish down to make it smooth. In this particular build, I'm using 2500 grit sandpaper, and that starts out on the sheet like this, and I just tear off pieces of it. Normally, that's what I did, and that's where one of the tips are going to come in. Um, as you can see laying here, we have some sandpaper that has been torn off the other sheet. And if you look over here on the edges, you'll notice that there's yellow paper. And if you find the piece that yellow paper trailed off of, which I'm not sure if I got it laying here, it's here somewhere, you'll have a real sharp edge of abrasive. So tearing it off into these little pieces is not what you want to do. What you want to do is come in with the pair of scissors. And like I say, I've already done this once, but now I got to do it again because I deleted the video. And what you want to do is just cut your little squares out with the scissors, just like that. And that way you don't have any of these jagged edges like we have on this just tore from the sheet. So this is all nice and clean, no jagged edges or anything on it, ready to go. So make sure you do that step there. The next step is, if you're getting ready to wet sand and buff a project ahead of time, think about when you're going to do it. And then you want to take those little pieces that we just cut right there, and you want to put them in a cup of water, and you want to make sure that they soften up. Usually, overnight, something like that works great, just so that you get the paper nice and soft. And if you grab one of these out of this bowl of water here and compare it to one that hasn't been in the water, you can definitely feel the difference, even on the edges and stuff. The edges do not feel as sharp, and that is because they're not. The paper has softened up, it'll float across the surface a lot better, and it won't leave any sharp edges gouging into your paint. So that's one of the little tricks that I've learned over the years. And all we have in here is just straight water, no dishwashing liquid, no detergents of any sort. It's just straight water. And you can do that with your tap water, or you can do it with bottled water, which is, refined a little bit better if you want to. This is just straight tap water. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take things apart here and get this out of the, get everything else out of the equation here. And we're going to pull the body off because that's what we're going to be working with. And then we're going to set the chassis and everything over to the side. And like I say, I've already done the procedure on the roof. You can see the reflection. That's my LED light up there above, and came out real good. So what we'll do is, we haven't did any wet sanding or anything right here on the sides of the body in this area in front of the wood graining all the way up to the front edge of the cowl here. So we're going to start out with the 2500 grit sandpaper. And we're going to go in. I'm going to get a little bit more water down on the surface. Now, what I'm trying to do here is just get out any dust nibs, get out any ups and downs in the finish. So we want to start out going over the whole surface very lightly with the sandpaper. And you're not trying to do a whole lot of sanding right now, because this is going to tell you how much you need to sand. Just go in and very lightly. You want to go over the whole thing. Now, if you have any, raised areas or whatever here or there, make sure you're not going over top of them with the sandpaper. If you do, you want to do it very lightly and not very many times, because the high points are where the least amount of paint is. So any edges or anything like that, be very careful around them, because you will cut through the paint, and that's not a good thing. So we just want to do a rough like that, just quickly sand that down. And then I have some squares of shop towel over here that I cut out. I'm going to come in and I'm going to dry that surface off. And what I'm looking for is any little glossy spots that's left. And we'll hold it up here and see if we can get a view of the side of it. And down in this area here, you can see those little glossy circles that you see down in there, and like right there around the back edge of the door. That's what you're trying to flatten down with the sandpaper. So what you do is you look for them all over, and that's the areas that you want to address. So we're going to come in and we're going to we'll pick an area. Like right now, I'm working on this area right up here underneath of the wood graining, right at the top of the purple. So we're going to come in and we're going to work that area. We're not worried about the rest of the areas right now. We'll get to them in a minute, or we'll get to those in the next step, I should say. So we're going to go in. We know that we needed to do a little bit more work in this area right here. So we're going to sand that, and then we're going to come in and we're going to dry it off. And when you dry it off, that shows the ups and downs in it. If you have any low spots left, it's going to show up as a shiny, in this case, purple, and you'll be dull everywhere else. So everything looks pretty good right there. We have some more that's needs to be sanded right through here. So like I say, we're looking good there. We don't need to really worry about that anymore. We're going to go ahead and move up here to the front area where we have some shiny spots left, and we're going to lightly sand that. Now you can sand back and forth, you can sand in a circle, it doesn't really matter. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on the paper, just sand very lightly. And you don't want to sand for a long time in one area. We want to keep moving around and come back in and dry that off. And every time you dry it off, what you're looking for is those low spots. If you don't have any more of those low spots showing up, then you don't need to sand in that area anymore. I still have a little bit more right there in the center of this cowl, right in front of the door edge there. So we're going to go back over that, sand that out a little bit more. And some of it, I mean, if you have some real little tiny spots, you don't really need to worry about it that much, because the compound should take that out. But the smoother and the flatter you can get this surface now, the better that it's going to polish up when you start with your compounds. So we're going back in, drying it off again. We're going to check our work, make sure everything looks good. I see a little bit of an area right here between where the panel line is on the door. So we're going to come back in and very lightly go across that area again. And like I say, you want to make sure you keep your sandpaper off these raised edges and off of any returns or whatever, like where it drops down into the cowl. You don't want to run the sandpaper across that area, because you'll cut right through the paint in no time. Because paint's going to be very thin on the corners, and it's going to be very thin on your raised areas. So don't do that. That's bad. So now we're going back in on that spot. We're going to dry it off again with the towel and check it. Everything looks good through this area. We still have a little bit more work to do back here. Right here at the back edge of the door and right up through here. Same procedure. We're going to go in and we're going to sand that down. Now on this particular build, in case anybody asks or wants to ask, I am not going to sand the clear coat that is over the wood grain. And the reason why I'm not going to do that is I want to create a little bit of a difference between the shiny paint on the body and the clear coat that's on this wood. I want it to look like the wood was done in a varnish, and not done where when you get everything wet sanded and buffed, it all looks the same sheen. I'm trying to stay off of that wood grain and just leave the sheen that's down there from the tester's one coat clear that we put on. And we'll run some compounds over it just to buff it a little bit, but we're not going to wet sand the wood grain. And that's up to you, whichever way you want to do that. I just do that to leave a little bit of interest in my model. When I'm doing the wood grain, it will show up in the finished product as, two different sheens, and that's what we're after. And if this towel that you're using, that little square, starts to get too wet and you notice it's putting a lot of moisture back on the surface, go ahead and switch up to a new one. A new one will dry it off a lot quicker. And check all your spots and see what you have. I have a little bit of low spot right back here in the back that I haven't quite got out. And that's what I say, it's just a process of elimination. You just want to keep working these little spots and getting all the glossy spots that you see in the finish out. And once you get all those low spots out of there, your finish is going to be nice and flat, and it will buff up real nice. And you will definitely see a difference in your paint work by using these steps. We're going to go in and dry that off again and see if we got rid of that little spot. Yes, we did. It's gone. Looks good. So we're going to hold this up here and let everybody see the stage that we're at right now. Now, this is going to be pretty much there's the camera. There it is. You can see how flat that is, but how smooth it is also. It's nice and flat, no ups and downs in it, so we're looking real good. So that's pretty much all we're going to do with the 2500 grit sandpaper. Now, the next thing that we're going to move on to is, I have a piece, and I used this on the video that I deleted, but I'm going to reuse it again on this. This is the 3000 grit sanding sponge. We're going to come over here. We're going to wet down the sponge a little bit in the water. And then we're going to come over onto what we just did with the 2500. And we're going to blend everything in. We're going to sand the whole surface of that area. And as you can see, I'm keeping the edge up off of this wood grain over here. So we're going to sand all that out. We're going to get one pass over that with the 3000 grit. We'll go back and we will dry it off. And at this point in time, you want to check everything and make sure that it's nice and flat, all an even sheen across the whole surface. And once you get it looking like that right there, you will be ready to move on to the compounding part of the procedure. That will be coming up in the next video. So stay tuned for that. And hopefully I don't delete this one again and have to redo it. But that's the same procedure as far as wet sanding that I used on the roof to get it to come up to this sheen after we compounded it. Same procedure that we used on the hood also. So that's all there is to wet sanding. If you need any, further tips or tricks or whatever on it, or you have any questions about it, leave me a comment on the video. I'll be more glad to help you out. But like I say, I'm not going to do the whole car on video because it's all the same steps. Wherever it's purple on here, we're going to do this exact same step. Same thing with the compounding. Like when we do the roof, it'll be the same on every other spot on the car. So that's all there is to it. So stay tuned for the next one. Like always, I thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.